The leaders of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, a women's political union, recognized the power of the serial films to influence fan culture. In trying to find more supporters for their cause, both the NAWSA and WPU wanted to shift the female fan culture into the suffrage movement by hiring popular serial filmmakers to make silent films that revolved around the suffrage movement. The suffrage leaders recognized that film, like no other medium, offered suffragists a site where the modern embodiments of femininity could be visualized, where women's evolving relation to political life could be dramatized, and where a distinctly feminist community could be fostered among patrons of the nation's movie houses. Through the crazed fan culture surrounding serial movies, suffragist leaders recognized the power of silent films to directly influence the attitude and behavior of ordinary people. Also, a large part of the audience were made up of working-class people who were very vulnerable to the power of mass media, because the modern urban world isolates people, alienating them from traditional forms of knowledge and making them dependent on information and direction from mass media. The suffragists unknowingly tapped into how mass media, in this case silent films, affected and influenced mass society. Before the suffragists began making their own pro-suffrage films, filmmakers first caught on to the hilarious idea of women voting and began making suffrage comedies that usually argued against the suffrage movement. Many of these one-reel comedies released during these years dramatize simple role reversal scenarios where male and female domains are transposed in order to figure the disruptions enacted by equal suffrage. Women learn that they cannot perform male tasks in society, while men are demeaned through domestic labor. All imagine life after women have been granted full citizenship. Movies like When Women Win and Jane the Justice all portray women to be too emotional, too unstable, and too helpless to run for public office and become equal with men, while men are humiliated and shown to be inadequate homemakers and primary caregivers to their children. Suffragist women are also portrayed as troublemakers and characterized as mannish and ugly. While these silent films were fictional comedies, they visualized and in some cases reinforced the nightmarish fear that both men and women had about the future where women had the right to vote. In Charlie Chaplin's Busy Day, Chaplin dresses in drag to play a suffragist who is jealous of her husband's flirtations with another woman. As you can see in the movie, Chaplin's character is disorderly and violent. Though a comedy, this movie reinforced the idea that suffragists were masculine-looking women who would constantly try to dominate men. This short film also portrays the suffragists as overly emotional and unstable, proving those women were not fit for public life. At the end of the film, the husband shoves Chaplin's character into the ocean and no one comes to her aid, leaving her to drown, signifying the end of the women's suffrage movement. In order to combat the image these anti-suffrage comedies portrayed, well-known leaders of the suffrage movement began appearing in silent films themselves. By appearing on silent films, the suffrage leaders gave a face to match the names that many people already knew. NAWSA President and Vice President Dr. Anna Howard and Jane Addams were names already associated with the suffrage movement, but it was their appearance in the suffrage film Votes for Women that they became the public embodiment of new feminine ideals, challenging and broadening acceptable gender norms. The appearance of the suffrage leaders humanized the suffrage movement and showed the public that suffragists were not all violent, ugly, man-hating women, but a real person. Seeing these real people allowed the public to internalize the suffrage movement. Unfortunately, many of these silent films no longer exist, and historians are left with newspaper reviews and pictures to analyze their impact. Through silent films, the image of womanhood was redefined and reinforced. The changes in female screen types, from the virgin to the flapper, are all important indicators that women's roles are not biological but cultural. Historical and economical and societal factors greatly influence the definition of femininity, and through the mass media of cinema, these ideas were consciously and subconsciously propagated through the masses. Aware of the influential power of silent films, Suffragettes used the medium to their advantage, challenging the image of womanhood that was so popular in that era and eventually succeeded in winning the right to vote.